In Central and Eastern European countries, it is customary to celebrate Saint Nicholas, more commonly known as Santa Claus, on December 6th, a holiday just as important as Christmas. Children find small gifts in their boots in the morning, while adults dress up as Santa and give out small packages of candy in school and kindergarten. For university students or companies, the parties usually include excessive drinking and socializing. If you are an expat in a country where St. Nicholas is celebrated, you really can't avoid a party in the days leading up to the holiday. The 22-year-old Ophélie Bretnacher disappeared on her way home from such a party on the 4th of December 2008. Her disappearance and subsequent death is more than puzzling to the police. The circumstances of her tragic fate are unclear despite extensive efforts to uncover the truth. Ophélie was the daughter of a very wealthy and influential family. Her father, Francis, was a mining engineer working in a high-up position at a petrol company living in Austria at the time. Ophélie was in her final year of her master's studies in business and economics at the Reims University in France and moved to Budapest in September of 2008 as an exchange student. Her graduation was due in just a few months, and this is always a stressful but perhaps exciting time for everybody. She was an excellent competitive swimmer and loved hiking and running, loved nature, and was full of ambition. She moved in with her host family, who was a married couple with 2 children in a very good area. And in exchange for accommodation, she often babysat and took care of the couple's 2 children. She was a young lady, she was happy living abroad, and she had no trouble partying and drinking alcohol with her friends. Now, according to her friends, she held her drink quite well and did not get drunk too easily. All in all, her life was great and she had a bright future ahead of her. But all of that was stripped away from her very soon. The Santa Claus party took place on a Wednesday, on the 3rd of December. The chosen location was a bar called Portside of Cuba in the central location in Budapest. Many other exchange students attended, including an Italian lad named Pier Paolo. Pierre got quite close to Ophélie, though it cannot be determined whether they were dating, and that is because Ophélie had her boyfriend, or according to some sources, even fiancé, of 7 years waiting for her back in France. As some witnesses said, the party was going wild and everybody was drinking heavily. Allegedly, Ophélie drank by herself 7 beers and 7 shots. For context, in Hungary, a beer is half a liter and the shot is 40 ml, adding up to altogether 120 ounces of beer and almost 10 ounces of spirit. Now, that is excessive even for a grown man, let alone for a young lady like herself. Ophélie was 173 centimeters tall and 58 kilograms heavy, which is about 5 foot 8 inches and 128 pounds. So after this much alcohol, she surely should have been very intoxicated, even if her friends said that she did not get drunk too easily. Besides this, the party went smoothly and everybody was in a great mood and enjoying the holiday together. However, it is worth mentioning that Ophélie may have had more feelings for Pierre than he reciprocated. It seems like he enjoyed her attention but did not think they were anything serious. On the other hand, this entire close friendship, so to speak, is alleged and cannot be confirmed, like I said. This resulted in an argument between the two, and Ophélie was seen leaving the pub at 2:40 a.m., by herself, without saying goodbye to anyone except for one friend. It seems like whatever argument she had with Pierre was upsetting enough for her to leave without a word. But what happened next is unclear. The pub was located on the Pest side, while Ophélie lived in Buda. Buda and Pest united in 1873, and the two sides are separated by the Danube River, 13 bridges connecting the two. After a night out, Ophélie always used to either take a taxi all the way home or walk a few minutes to the nearby central train station and take a night bus from there. She never walked all the way home because it was a great distance, especially on such a cold and rainy winter night. However, this time she left the pub on foot. You can see Ophélie's journey home on this map. We know that she left the pub at 2:40 a.m. and then she was next sighted at 2:43 a.m. on camera number 1, and then on camera number 2 at 2:45 a.m. After this, we are not sure which route she may have taken, so I marked it as green and orange. It makes more sense to take the orange route because it's less turns and on a more frequented and busy street. However, it is also possible that she took the green route with more turns and in darker streets for some reason. This doesn't make so much sense as it would have delayed her journey even more. There we can see her crossing the street, and it is possible that she crossed the street in order to cross the park, and she may or may not have ended up at the chain bridge. The CCTV footage also shows her passing by some pedestrians as well as a taxicab. One of the pedestrians is a man in a red coat, who crossed the street seconds after she did. The taxi driver was also looking in her direction when she walked past, then got into the car and left on the inside lane. Might I add, she could have taken this taxi home, assuming she had cash on her person, but for some reason she did not. Perhaps because she felt uncomfortable about the driver? It almost looks like he was following her as he left, soon after she and the man in the red coat also crossed the street. The taxi was going quite slowly, and it almost seems like Ophélie was starting to walk a little bit faster at this point. Could she feel unsafe for some reason? Could it mean that the taxi driver was tailing her? Did the man in the red coat say something to her that scared her? The final CCTV footage shows her crossing the street and taking direction to the chain bridge. Now, the last CCTV footage is of camera number 4, but this footage does not show her and only other people and passerbys who may or may not have seen her walking on the bridge. And this CCTV footage also does not include the time that it was taken, so we don't even know if she got there at all, and if she did, then what time it was. The reason why I think this is important to mention is because on this map you can see the route that she would have taken if she decided to take the night bus from her usual place at the train station. This is marked with the blue dots. So it is not entirely impossible that maybe she decided to go that route but changed her mind somewhere around the Basilica. Maybe she figured that instead of walking 25 minutes to the train station, she could just cross the bridge or take a night bus from there and make her journey a little bit shorter. We lose track of her and nobody saw her alive ever again. It is worth noting that there were 10 other CCTV cameras in the area, but they were either not functioning that night or were not pointing in the direction that she was walking by. Her bag with her documents and her cell phone was found about 25 meters from the chain bridge on the Pest side, suggesting that she left, or was separated from her bag before crossing the bridge. 2 young Italian guys found the bag the same night at around 3:30 in the morning, not much longer after she was last seen on the footage. But, and this is a big but, the 2 guys did not give the bag when they found it, but only the next afternoon to a completely random girl they found in Ophélie's phone contact list. But fine, perhaps they assumed that the bag just got lost after a crazy night out and did not think much of it. Maybe they thought that giving it to one of her friends from her contact list would be easier than calling a police for something as little as a lost bag on the street. And the delay in handing over the bag to this girl from the contact list is not that out of place either, if they did not want to bother this person that they were gonna call in the middle of the night. But take note of this detail because we will revisit it very soon. Her disappearance was reported by her host family, but not on the day of her disappearance, only the next day, on the 5th of December. Right, they could have assumed that she spent the night with her friends and was taking the day to recover from a long night out. But the host father only reported her missing in the late afternoon when Ophélie did not show up at the kindergarten to pick up the host parent's son. Her family was informed of her going missing and flew to Hungary right away. They created a now archived website where I got some of the information from. They opened some Facebook groups to help find Ophélie and organized vigils in both France and Hungary. They petitioned for an investigation against an unknown kidnapper in France and put up a reward of 2 million forints for anyone who can provide information to help find her. The investigation started out quite slowly, as if the Hungarian police did not give too much importance to it. They thought that Ophélie was just a drunk exchange student who spent the night somewhere but was eventually gonna show up. But as the French media became aware of the situation, that a very influential rich millionaire's daughter disappeared, things sped up and the Hungarian police started taking it a bit more seriously too. They created a task force of 7 investigators who questioned 100 people, 40 of which were exchange students who met Ophélie the night before. The police spent a day searching the chain bridge for any trace or evidence that she crossed it on foot. They searched for fingerprints, DNA, or anything else that could belong to her. She was not wearing gloves at night, but finding fingerprints or DNA on a bridge where people usually just walk across on their feet, not touching anything, especially days later, sounds like finding a needle in a haystack, if you ask me. The police suspected either suicide or an accident, and it made sense to search for fingerprints on the railings, after all. And yes, her disappearance could have meant a suicide or an accident. After all, it is not impossible to fall or jump from the bridge into the icy water of the river beneath. But it is not so straightforward. Suicide seems kind of far-fetched for a few reasons. First of all, it may be possible to deliberately jump into the river without touching the railing, but for a highly intoxicated person, after drinking as much as Ophélie did, it seems unlikely that she would care to not touch anything while jumping. And it does not seem like a top priority when someone is trying to end their life. Second of all, it sounds a bit ironic, so to speak, that a competitive swimmer would end their own life by drowning. Not to mention that jumping in the icy cold water in winter when your swimming instinct will surely kick in, dying this way would be, well, uncomfortable and inconvenient, with a lack of a better word, but I may be wrong on that. I am not sure what goes on in the head of a suicidal person. Like I said, the police was theorizing that she stood on top of the railing without touching it with her hands, so not leaving any fingerprints, and jumped into the water on her own accord. But the railing is quite high and it is above anyone's, even a tall person's gravitational center, and she would have had to step really high in order to be able to stand on it without supporting herself with her hand. And this should have left some kind of a trace, right? Therefore, the only supporting factor that she was anywhere near the bridge is her bag being found there and the CCTV footage, or better said, lack thereof, because the last footage we have of her does not show her going onto the bridge. just going in the general direction of the bridge. So she may not have reached the bridge at all. On the other hand, unfortunately, some newspapers were speculating on Ophélie's mental health. Allegedly, the day before, she had a big argument with her parents because she wanted to stay in Hungary for longer than planned. But this would have meant her missing out on a very good career opportunity in Austria. Besides that, her room in her host parents' house was found in a mess, and they even found moldy food and a lot of trash everywhere scattered around, which could have indicated that her mental health wasn't the best, but we cannot outright determine if she had clinical depression and suicidal thoughts. So, all in all, if you ask me, suicide could be ruled out just by logical thinking.
As for an accident, the puzzle pieces also don't really add up. The weather conditions could grant an unfortunate accident, but most likely not something of this sort. It was 4 degrees Celsius outside with 20 kilometers per hour wind and light rain. Someone really clumsy or drunk could have slipped on the concrete floor and hit their butt. But even if Ophélie was extraordinarily drunk, she could not have fallen over or between the railings by accident, as there is simply no room. She may have accidentally fallen into the river at a different location, but definitely not on the bridge. So finally, the last theory could be some kind of foul play, and this makes most sense in my opinion. The 2 Italian men who found the bag were questioned and claimed that they did not know either Ophélie or Pier Paolo. But soon after their questioning, both men disappeared from the police's radar and re-emerged only 3 years later. That by itself is incredibly suspicious, but to add more to this, during their second questioning 3 years later, they admitted that they were the personal acquaintances of Pier Paolo. It is unclear why they lied about it the first time around, unless they had something to hide.
To add to the mystery, Pierre fled Hungary 1 day after Ophélie went missing, though with a pre-purchased plane ticket. But on top of that, he laid low and disappeared off the police's radar for 2 years, avoiding cooperation in the investigation. He was found by chance in Italy with a routine identity check, so that is when he was finally questioned about Ophélie's disappearance. But he was cleared as a person of interest because he had a strong alibi. However, it is quite curious that he laid low for 2 years and avoided talking with the police until he absolutely had to.
2 separate witnesses came forward saying they heard a woman screaming and crying from somewhere around where her bag was found. So could that be Ophélie? Would that suggest that she had not even reached the other side of the bridge before she met her tragic fate? So the police played a recorded female scream to test if it indeed could be heard from the other side of the river, to see whether the ear witnesses' claims stood ground. The findings of this test are not published, unfortunately, but from my personal knowledge of this area, I find it feasible that a loud enough scream could be heard from across the river in the silent night, but I am not convinced crying could be. It is possible that these ear witnesses heard 2 homeless people arguing under the bridge, one of which was a woman. As a side note, multiple homeless people stayed the night under the bridge, but none of them heard any screaming or crying that night. Another person came forward saying that she was driving her car in the area in the same hour that Ophélie was supposed to be nearby, and that this eyewitness saw a parked car with some men inside who were arguing. The car was parked in the same spot where the bag was later found, though this tip could not be confirmed either.
The Hungarian police searched the river with a sonar machine, but no body was found. In the meanwhile, back in France, Ophélie's family reported their daughter as missing, and the French police started an investigation into a possible kidnapping. The case was huge there, with tens of thousands of people sharing her case on social media. The French police also arrived in Hungary to continue with the investigation together with the Hungarians. However, Christmas and New Year's Eve came and went without Ophélie. A body was found in a port bay 2 months later on February 12, 2009. It was assumed to be Ophélie's from her clothes, jewelry, hair, and body type, and this was confirmed with a DNA test just a few days later. Her parents traveled to Hungary immediately and did absolutely everything to help the police's work and find out what happened to their poor daughter. Being an influential millionaire with diplomatic connections, this was not too hard for the father, but somehow still not enough. The Hungarian police conducted an autopsy and it was determined that her cause of death was drowning, without any signs of foul play. A secondary autopsy made by French authorities found the same, so the assumed accident or possible suicide still seemed like a possibility. But there are some oddities too. On her right thigh, they found a big bruise which could suggest foul play. You may think, well, this could be the result of a terrible accident, but think for a second. Ophélie fell from 10 to 12 meters high into a 5.5 meter deep river with a rocky riverbed. This fall theoretically should have resulted in more and more serious injuries on her body if she was still alive at the time of the fall. But the oddities do not end there. According to the toxicology report, Ophélie's blood alcohol levels were 0.001%, which is consistent with light tipsiness. However, as we already know, she drank 7 beers and 7 shots in the party. This amount of alcohol should have taken about 10 hours to metabolize. Otherwise, she should have been much more intoxicated than just tipsy, if she really died in the early hours of the morning. However, based on the toxicology report, it seems like she may have died as much as 10 hours later than originally theorized. She could have spent those 10 unaccounted hours alive somewhere sobering up before ultimately dying in the early afternoon. Do you remember when I told you to take note of the 2 Italian guys who gave back the bag later in the afternoon and not when they allegedly found it at 3:30 a.m.? Could there be a correlation between the delay in giving back the bag and Ophélie possibly dying later than first thought? Not to be too speculative, but is it possible that the 2 Italian guys had a hand in what happened and conveniently got rid of the bag when they knew Ophélie was not going to be found for a while? Or this could simply mean that the people at the party indeed remembered the number of drinks she had incorrectly, which could also explain why she was seen walking completely normally on the CCTV footage. But we just can't go past the fact that she was found 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles away from the alleged scene of death, of which 35 meters were against opposing river currents, and according to the experts, it is impossible for a dead body to float against the river for 35 meters and then end up in a port bay 6 kilometers away. This could have been possible in one of 2 ways. Either her body was somehow caught up on a ship that carried her there, which is feasible, or somebody deliberately placed her body there. The next weird thing is that her body was found in quite clean condition, according to some sources, which goes against the idea that she was in the murky water for 2 months. Some dirt surely should have contaminated her hair and clothes. But why would someone try to hide her body in a well-frequented and busy port bay? Well, the ensuing port bay was slowly but surely being filled up with sand for a few months, as it was no longer necessary to have it there. It is by sheer luck that the body got caught up on some ropes in the exact area, due to be filled up with sand the next day. Whoever put it there most likely knew this and did not expect the body to be discovered. Other than the inconsistencies in the location and in the autopsy, there is more to suggest foul play. The police searched Ophélie's laptop and they saw that there were some files deleted from it after her death. One of these happened on December 8th, to which her father admitted to. He said that he deleted a picture of Ophélie holding a huge glass of beer in an attempt to preserve her dignity and to avoid malicious rumors starting about her drinking habits. However, on the next day, on December 9th, more files were deleted, but we don't know what these files were and we don't know who may have deleted them or who had access to her computer.
And the final pieces of information that we have. Sure, her body must have been in a clean condition, but after 2 months in water, some algae must have been on it. It is not public information if they conducted forensic testing to determine the time and the place of death from the algae growth on her body, but it would have been immensely helpful for sure. And this is all the information that has been disclosed publicly. She may or may not have had depression, but the circumstances do not really match the theory that she ended her life. The weather conditions could have caused an accident, but not a fatal one like this, and it is simply not consistent with her injuries. Her body was found in a seemingly impossible place where it should not have ended up in without help. Despite the Hungarian police's stance on the matter, to me it seems more and more like she was met with foul play. The Hungarian police closed their investigation on April 8, 2014, as an accidental death. The theory that her death had anything to do with the bridge in the first place is based simply on the two Italian men's statements, though we need to consider the fact that they have lied to the police on at least one occasion when they claim they did not personally know Pier Paolo, shortly before going off the police's radar for 3 years. She had so much going on for her, and she had a bright future ahead of her. The only possibility I can think of is foul play, but then all we are left with are unanswered questions. Did those Italian men have something to do with it? Or know who did it? Were they just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did somebody plan to hurt Ophélie, or was it a crime of opportunity? Otherwise, how did her body end up in an impossible location? What stage of decomposition was her body in when they found her? How did it suddenly emerge in the bay 2 months later, and where was it before that? If somebody put her there, where did they store her body for that long? Or is it possible at all that she died much later than theorized and somebody was harboring her for weeks before they killed her? And anyway, why would someone want to kill her? She was the daughter of a wealthy and influential family. If someone knew this and wanted ransom money, why didn't they come forward? Was it intended as a threat or punishment for something maybe her influential father may have done? If it was premeditated, could the murderer know that she was going to go home by herself on foot and making detours? Or did they influence her decision on making detours? If it was a crime of opportunity, then why? They did not rob her of her valuables, but there is also no public information on whether she was sexually assaulted before her death. And if she had been, why was she found fully clothed? Could have it been the man in the red coat and or the taxi driver seen on CCTV? Or was that just a coincidence? Besides, isn't it convenient that the Italian guys, both acquaintances of Pierre, happened to find her bag in such a big city at such an odd hour? Why did they lie about knowing Pierre? And why did they go into hiding for 3 years? Why did Pierre go off the police's radar? And why did the Hungarian police not want to pursue the investigation despite all the evidence?
For now, it seems like we will only have an answer to these questions if somebody comes forward. Somebody who saw something, did something, or knows the person who did something. But let's hope and pray that Ophélie and her family can finally get the justice that they deserve. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your day to listen to Ophélie's story, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!